Hello, in this video we're going to be taking a look at the student responses we've had from a recent survey we put out to those who sat the Strategic Case Study February 2023 exam. So if you are thinking of sitting the Strategic Case Study exam this May, this is going to be a really useful video to you because basically you're going to get some advice and feedback from students who just sat the exam a month or so ago, at least at the time of recording. Some of the things we're going to look at is how difficult the students found the exam compared to their expectations, what went well, what didn't go well for them in the exam, what they would have spent more time on, what they would have spent less time on in their preparation. And we're going to finish up by looking at their one bit of key advice that they give to future students. So let's take a look at the results. So first of all, to show you the breakdown of the respondents, quite a few of these students this time around, it's not always like this, but this time around, more than 80% of respondents were Astranti students, so they were on one of our courses. But we did get some respondents who didn't use any Astranti material, so there is a slightly wider scope here than just our own students. And the first question we always ask is, how difficult did you find the exam compared to your expectations? So the big yellow segment here is as expected. So this group of students found the exam about as difficult as they expected. So what we want to get from this question is an idea of what student expectations are and how well they are being managed. This isn't necessarily a comment on how difficult the exam actually was compared to other sittings. It's more about how students found it and how well prepared they are. So as we said, nearly a half, just under a half, found it about as difficult as expected, which is good, which means, you know, the majority of people, their expectations are being adequately managed. In this red quadrant or red segment here, we've got nearly 30% of students who found it more difficult than they expected. So again, it's not necessarily that the exam was more difficult than last time. It's just these students didn't think it was going to be as hard as it ended up being. And that's not a great position to be in, really. You want to be as prepared and you want to have the right expectations for this exam. And it is, as we'll see through these responses, it's a difficult exam. Although the pass rates aren't really low, they're in the kind of 60 to 70% region on average over the past several years. Actually, there are a lot of things in this exam that can go wrong, and so it's, you know, you don't want to be going into it expecting it to be easier than it actually is. Unfortunately, we do get a small group here, just a small number though, that's reassuring, who found the exam much more difficult. So they really, you know, either they got a very bad variant and they were really unlucky, or they really didn't expect it to be very difficult. They didn't put in the preparation, and so when they came to the exam day, they were really surprised at how hard they found it. We have this lucky group over here, 12.8% of students who found the exam easier than expected. So again, it's not necessarily the case that the exam was easy. It's just perhaps they thought it was going to be a lot harder than it was. And maybe they got a lot of topics that they were very comfortable with. And sometimes you do get lucky with how the variants land, and you might get a nice variant that's well suited to you. And so those students might find it a little bit easier. You do get this very small group of people who find it much easier. As you can see, though, it's a very small group. I think one person out of the nearly 40 responses that we got found it much easier. It's hard to see why. Perhaps they, they got lucky with the variant, or they thought it was going to be a lot more difficult than it was. And we've got this kind of standalone response, someone who didn't prepare enough. So that gives you a breakdown of how difficult people find the exam. So the next question is what went well in the exams? What kind of things are you kind of happy about, and what do you think went well in the exam? And you get lots of, although people can type in whatever they want, this is a kind of an open form response here. We do get the same things again and again. So things like time management, now that can go badly, often it does, as we'll see in a minute, but if time management goes well for you, it means you got through all the answers, perhaps with time to spare, you got to write everything that you wanted to write. That's a really nice feeling in these type of exams. Being familiar with the pre-scene, that's probably not something in the exam, but being familiar with the pre-scene obviously puts you in a good position to do well in the exam. Answer planning, so taking the time to plan your answers, sort of 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of each task to really plan your answer out and do a lot of the hard thinking up front, so that actually when you come to writing, what you're doing is fleshing out and expanding on your initial ideas rather than having to think as you are writing. Answer planning really helps with your answer structure as well. Some unfortunate person had nothing that went well for them in the exam, that's what it feels like sometimes in these exams. Planning and time management was good. Doing multiple mocks puts you in a good position to do well in the exam. It's basically like sitting the exam before sitting the exam, and so it's really, really good practice. Time management and application of pre-scene. We can see time management, structured answers, understanding the questions. So that means identifying the requirements and actually answering the question being asked rather than the question that you wanted to be asked, which is feedback we see again and again from the examiner. The students are misinterpreting the question, writing about what they want to write about, and actually it's not what they're supposed to be doing. Planning, structure and timing, time management, etc., etc. So quite a lot of the responses picking up on the same sort of things. So if you practice those things like time management and planning, that's going to help you in your exam. And a good way to do all of that is to sit as many mocks as you can. So what could have gone better in your exam is the next question we ask. And again, a lot of the same sort of things will come up. So time management, understanding the requirements. So in the actual exam itself, because you're presented with an email or a memo and you've got to decipher that and understand exactly what it is you're being asked to do. That can be tricky under that pressure of the exam. And so it is a skill that is worth practicing and developing. More detailed paragraphs, so perhaps that's an issue with time management or perhaps not being fully confident with the material and the topic. Theory revision, this is an interesting one at strategic case study because theory is less relevant in these exams. At the operational level, it's a really big part of the case study exam is being able to talk about the theory from the syllabus, but slightly less so at management. And then by the time you're at the strategic case study, it's kind of expected that you know the syllabus, but really you're moving beyond just showing your knowledge of the syllabus. You're kind of you're acting as a senior manager within that company, and you're doing analysis and evaluation, and you're really applying your knowledge to new situations. So theory revision, it's going to be important to make sure you have the tools in your kit to be able to give those analyses and to give good answers. So if you haven't done the basic theory revision, you're going to struggle. I think that's what's the point that's kind of what we could draw from this particular bit of feedback. Someone was really thrown by the prompts in the exam, so that comes down to being able to understand the question that is being asked. Have started early, so could have started either probably the preparation there, so making sure you start preparing for the exam as soon as you possibly can. Inclusion of industry examples, which I prepared, but they found that difficult. Keyboard was a disaster at the task center. That's really unfortunate. There's not much you can do to prepare for that, so kind of a nightmare scenario. Not enough sleep and preparation for the exam. So again, that's unfortunate. This is a stressful exam, and you want to be well rested. You want to have had got up and had some breakfast and be in a good mental state to be sitting the exam, and do whatever you can to try and be in a good place mentally when you come to sit the exam. What else could have gone better? More time to expand on some points. Application of theory. Questions were complex. Don't panic. Feeling more confident with theory, etc. So quite a lot of different things being said here. Better coverage of topics. So having done a bit slightly better studying in preparation for the exam, going into more depth with answers, revision of common topics. So most of the kind of general points there relating to doing good revision of the key topics and being able to understand the requirements, being able to talk about the topic or the question that has come up in the exam for you. So next up is the question, what would you have spent more time on in your preparation now that you have completed the exam? So if you could do your time again, what would you spend more time on to give you better chances when it comes to the exam? The number one response here is revision of theory. So most people would have spent a bit more time revising theory. It is less than half though. So although it's the most common sort of overall result, actually more than half of people didn't pick that. So a lot of people are happy with their revision. This is going to be something that people pick if they go into the exam and a bit of theory has come up that they really weren't expecting or hadn't revised for or had no idea about, and they're really going to struggle to give an adequate answer. I would just caveat this with the fact that you don't need to recite the theory that you're learning from the strategic syllabus. You are moving on from that to application, analysis and evaluation. But if you don't have that basic toolkit there, then you really are going to struggle to give good quality answers. In second place, mock exam practice. This always scores highly because it's, people go into the actual exam. Maybe they've done a couple of mocks, maybe they haven't done anything, and suddenly they realize how valuable it would have been to have done some mocks before actually sitting the exam. In third place, industry research and analysis. That's an interesting one to score highly here. That usually is something that people spend too much time on, particularly at the operational and management level. At the strategic level, though, I can see this being useful because you are a senior manager in a company, and wider industry understanding and understanding of kind of the competitive landscape and competitors and the wider business ecosystem. And just that kind of knowledge could really help you to develop your answers and give really good quality answers. So making sure that you don't skip over the industry analysis is perhaps the best way to interpret that, rather than spending a lot of time doing wider industry research. That's not the best way to spend your time. Another high scoring one here is time management practice. Okay, so sitting mock exams and practicing under time conditions is really going to benefit you. Answer planning is another one here. So learning how to plan your answers and making sure you actually do it, and having a go at planning your answer in a few mocks so you understand kind of how it works and the best way to do it. And a smaller group here, but still typing speed practice. Worth mentioning, if you're a slower than average typer, it might be worth spending a little bit of time over the next few weeks just trying to up your your kind of typing speed. Just so you can get down an extra few paragraphs in the exam. That might be the difference between passing and failing. What would you have spent less time on in your preparation now that you've completed the exam? Well, interestingly, the top response here is typing speed practice. Notice that there's only a few respondents there, that perhaps a few people spent time developing their typing speed when they were actually perfectly adequate. So if you've got an average typing speed of, I think it's about 30 to 40 words per minute, or if you're faster than that as a kind of average office worker, if you work at a computer, you're probably typing fast enough. If you are slower than average, you might need to work on it a little bit. Not something to spend too much time on though. And another one here, again, worth noting that overall of the 30 respondents, it's quite a small percentage of those respondents chose that they would have spent less time revising theory. So these were people that were confident, and when they went into the exam, they realized they didn't really need to have spent that much time revising theory. It's more important to learn how to apply that theory and give good answers and analysis. No one would have spent less time doing mock exam practice. That's, even though that sort of suggests no data, that in and of itself is quite an important statistic for you. Industry research and analysis. So this is the other side of the coin here. Some people wish they'd spent more time on it. Perhaps they spent no time on it, and a bit of wider industry research would have been good. But again, it's not something you really want to spend much more time on beyond the first week. So you have about 6 to 8 weeks to prepare for the exam. Most of your industry analysis needs to be wrapped up within that first week, really. You don't want to be coming back to that and spending lots of time on that over that period of time that you're preparing for the exam. And to some extent, the same applies to the pre-scene analysis. A few people here wish they'd spent less time on it. That's probably because they were still looking at the pre-scene, perhaps 3 or 4 weeks into their preparation. If you follow the Astranti course structure, the pre-scene analysis is pretty much wrapped up after the first week. So it's quite an intensive first week of analysis, but beyond that, you're not really doing much pre-scene analysis. So that's kind of how we would advise you approach that. Answer planning, again, just a small number of people here. It's not really statistically that relevant, but people who practiced lots of answer planning, once you've kind of got the gist of how to plan an answer, you only need to do that a few times before you can utilize it. You don't need to spend lots and lots of time practicing your answer planning. Okay, so the final section was if you were to give one tip for future students, what would that be? So let's go through some of these. So time management and speed of typing. So a lot of this is reiterating what we've just seen in the 2 graphs above. Prepare for anything. That's, that although that is a tip, it's not the most useful tip, is it? Because preparing for anything is, how do you even do that? But something you think wouldn't be relevant will come up. So perhaps to make that useful feedback, it would be, don't go into the exam unprepared or expecting to be able to blag it, because you won't. It's a tough exam and you need to be able to, give good quality answers. So rather than prepare for anything, just prepare for the exam and make sure you understand what's required of you and that you are able to perform on the day. Practice mock exams. Start with practice, practice, practice. So the more practice you do, the more kind of comfortable you're going to be in the actual exam itself. People here recommending following the entire Astranti schedule. So we do have a particular course structure that we recommend. It's in 5 phases. We find that is fairly successful. We did recently, in the last year, win the Pass Rate Excellence Award from CIMA. So our students do get higher scores on average than the average exam passing scores. So there's something that we're doing right. Know your theory and practice mocks. Check your test center, know your route, be prepared. So anything you can do to take stress away on the actual day. If you've never been to the test center, you don't know how to get there, you get caught in traffic, you're worried about being late. You don't want that kind of scenario on exam days. So be prepared and try and remove anything that could be adding stress on the exam day itself. Do as many mocks as you can. It's time consuming, but it really helps. So yeah, it's like, motivation is a key thing here. You really need to try and stay motivated for the entire 6 to 8 weeks that you have to prepare. Really, try and push yourself, because really you don't want to be having to reset this exam again. You have to go through the whole process again, and you really want to be passing it and moving on, particularly at this level, because this is your last exam and you want to pass and move on and be able to move ahead with your career. So it's worth really putting the effort in and trying to keep your motivation up for that period of time to make sure you do well in the exam. Okay, so plenty of other feedback there. I'm just scrolling through it. If there's anything that stands out to you, feel free to pause it and have a bit of a read through that. But I think generally the key points have been made here. The key is to practice mock exams, be prepared. And, if you are looking for a course and you're looking to sit the exam, about Astranti already, then, get in touch with us. We'll be happy to kind of talk you through what we have on our premium course and how that might help you to prepare. But whatever situation you're in, if you are looking at sitting the exam in May, I hope this video was useful to you. It's given you some things to think about, and, best of luck when you come to sit the exam. I hope you do well, and, best of luck with your studies. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that useful, and remember to like and subscribe for more Astranti content.